Hi everyone, Dr. Jules here. I wanted to celebrate because EVO 2023 just ended. And I might not be very good at them, but I love watching fighting games, and I'm really interested in the FGC itself. A little bit after EVO, a tweet by the Smash player and commentator Coney came out, where he made a little bit of a tier list looking at how fun each game at EVO was to watch as a casual fan. The opinions there were a little divisive, but I think that the core concept is such a great one. I love looking at media and content that is obviously intended for a die-hard pro audience and seeing how a casual fan or a first-timer would come in and would enjoy that experience. So, kind of taking some inspiration from Coney and his list, this is my look at what was the most fun game at EVO 2023 for a casual fan to watch. We're also only going to be looking at the 9 games that had their grand finals on the main stage. Sorry to all the other smaller communities, but there's just too many to focus on all of them. Another quick note before we start is that mirror matches were everywhere, with 6 of the 9 grand finals at this year's EVO involving both players using the same character. Now, I really like mirror matches, and a lot of other pros do as well. It gets to see the details, the nuances, all the little depth of each character that proves which player is superior. But that word right there, the nuance, the detail, all of that stuff's going to be lost on someone that is watching a tournament for the first time. So the casual fan isn't going to enjoy a mirror match as much as someone who spent a lot of time in the scene is. So I am going to be taking that into consideration. A quick shout out to Tampa Never Sleeps, who've been really great in all of their online streams of making sure that both players are color coded at the top, so it's always easy in a mirror match to tell who is who. Alright, so without further ado, why don't we get to day 1 of EVO 2023, and let's start talking about the first grand final that we got over the weekend with Mortal Kombat 11. So, our first grand final, Mortal Kombat 11, started with a mirror match between 2 young aggro players, Nicholas and Ninja Killa. Now, I play Mortal Kombat more than I do most other fighting game franchises, so I have a bit of a bias, but I really like the look and the visuals of the Mortal Kombat series. They're realistic, but with enough flash and polish that it gives it its own style and its own look. More importantly, MK is always super easy to follow. Without knowing anything about the game, you can sit down and you can watch. There's these big flashy combos, but they're all very readable. There's no particle effects or animations that get in the way of seeing when a character is being hit by another character. So it's easy for me to follow the actual gameplay itself without losing it in all of the details. Now, the set itself was one of the longest that we had at EVO this year, with a reset into a Game 5 situation, with each game getting more and more hype and closer between the 2 players as we went. Unfortunately, I wasn't super thrilled about the gameplay in the set itself. Both players are super aggro guys playing very aggressive characters, but the mirror match mechanics turned into a lot of button zoning at specific angles or using mobility cheese that the character had to run instead of to getting close. For being the final grand final that we're ever going to see out of Mortal Kombat 11, it really did end on a very un-Mortal Kombat feeling note. Overall, though, I really enjoyed the MK11 final. It's super easy to follow. The graphics and the aesthetic of it make it easy for a first-time fan to watch and understand what's going on in the gameplay. The gameplay itself and the set as it went down might not be everyone's cup of tea, but overall, I think it's very noob-friendly. Next was the grand final for Melty Blood Type Lumina. Now, Coney got some flack online, especially from Melty Blood fans, for the fact that he put this game in the category of didn't watch and I'm glad. I think that is a very, very harsh tier to put the game in, but I get it. A lot of the issues here started with the visuals. The game looks fine, but it's really hard to follow any of the actual gameplay itself. The characters are moving so fast, and with the particle effects going over, it's really difficult to tell what is happening with the gameplay. It's hard to get a grasp of the nuances, especially for a zone or mirror match. What's worse for me, though, is the animation of the super moves, which just has a character's face flashing on screen momentarily as the move comes out, except that that's happening over and over again every single round. And to make it worse, With the mirror match, one character obviously is the normal color scheme and the other is wearing a black coat instead. But the super animation doesn't change based on the color scheme, which means that both characters have the exact same face appearing on screen when they do their super moves. So it's just a montage flash of this dude's face over and over and over again, which is super annoying and super distracting, but makes it really difficult to tell who is executing what move. Altogether, the gameplay of Melty Blood seems fine and it's fast-paced, and I enjoy that, but the visuals make it hard to read what the action is going on, and the way that the set kind of felt decided before it even started made it hard to get invested, even at the very beginning. Starting with our third out of 3 mirror matches in a row, we had the King of Fighters 15 Grand Final against Zhao Hai and ET. Now, I'm going to call it a mirror match because they were using 2 of the same 3 characters on their team, so I think that counts. I do want to say, I really like fighting games like this that have multiple characters on the same team. Like this, or Dragon Ball FighterZ, or Marvel vs. Capcom. It adds another level and it's interesting to watch. In terms of that gameplay, it's fine. It's nothing about the gameplay in King of Fighters really stands out to me. It looks like the most standard looking fighting game of the weekend. In terms of look, though, now I don't want to be just another King of Fighters hater because there's plenty of them out there, but this game is distractingly ugly. All of the graphics look 2 generations old. Every single character model looks worse than any other character model you saw over the weekend. But the thing that really gets me is the particle effects. Every time that someone lands a super move or a combo or one of these big fire kicks, the fire that comes off of that attack does not look like it belongs to the same animation that the characters do. There's no cohesion in the way that everything looks, and it's just messy and it looks unpolished or just frankly it's just ugly. Overall, King of Fighters just feels like the most vanilla game that we got at EVO this year. The gameplay looks fine, and it's not difficult to follow the action and see what's going on with the mechanics, but it is distractingly outdated in terms of its aesthetic. It doesn't seem to have any sense of identity or style that sets it apart from any other game. Out of everything that I watched over the weekend, King of Fighters definitely left the least impression on me. Next up was Grand Blue Fantasy vs. Rising, which was actually our first not mirror match at the tournament in a grand final. Between Gamera and Boo, this was also one of our most interesting tournaments here because this was an open beta tournament. This game is getting released much later in the year, so it was exciting to see this game being played for the first time by a lot of people, and it had definitely a super element of hype. Visually, the game looks nice. Nothing special, but every character has their own sense of style and identity. It looks different than all of the other games that were being played at EVO. And importantly, none of the animations or particle effects are distracting, which is apparently a big issue that I have with some of this stuff. In terms of the gameplay itself, this game was definitely a lot slower than some of the other ones we've looked at already, especially Melty Blood. That makes sense though, right? It's a pre-release, which means people haven't had as much time to practice this game. So this gameplay was less about, frame traps and optimized whatever, and was more about those fundamentals, the basic footsies and pokes, punish and counter punish. Now, that being said, while slower gameplay does sound derogatory, I kind of mean it as a compliment here. One of the things that I'm going to bash a lot of games on here is that you can't watch the game and understand what's happening. The slower pace of Grand Blue here isn't slow to the point that it drags and it's boring to watch, but it's not so hyperactive fast that I can't tell what's going on the screen. It's got this wonderful balance in the middle where it's quick enough that gameplay feels intense, but I can understand what is happening on the screen and I can follow attack for attack what's going on in the match between the two. So between a visual style that doesn't distract and offers just enough identity to make it stand apart, gameplay that is actually easy for me as a new watcher to understand the gameplay itself, and just the fact that I didn't have to watch another mirror match, I gotta say that Grand Blue Fantasy vs. Rising really was a nice, pleasant surprise for me. Our final game of EVO Day 2, Dragon Ball FighterZ, came down to a perfect mirror match, with both players, Hikari and Yasha, playing the same three fighters in identical positions on both of their teams. Now, similar to Marvel vs. Capcom and Smash Bros., Dragon Ball really benefits from having this source material with the anime and the manga, and having this roster full of characters that people are going to immediately recognize. And that's a strength because it's going to bring new people that might not have been fighting game fans into the community. Also, just straight up, the power yell that the audience does during character intros is probably my favorite trend going on in the fighting game community right now.
Oh, yeah!
Now, Dragon Ball Fighter is a 100% perfect adaptation of Dragon Ball Z, for good and for bad. Now, all of the animations, the aesthetic, the characters themselves are perfect representations of themselves from the anime. It's perfect. But that applies to the gameplay too. Like any fight from Dragon Ball, a lot of the actual action and visuals that we're seeing is a lot of flurries of punches that are hard to keep up with, dragon rushes going on all over the place, but having 6 characters on screen at once with all these different assist attacks going on can be a lot of visual noise to try and decipher, and a lot of the time, it's hard to actually tell what's going on. Now, I know that it is an intended mechanic that you throw out this assist and that makes it fuzzy to tell where your attack is coming from. That's great for the players. As a viewer, it makes it more difficult to follow the gameplay itself and makes the game feel more chaotic than it does mechanical. So altogether, I love the aesthetic and the vibe and the energy that comes from Dragon Ball FighterZ. I think it's this perfect representation of the anime that I fell in love with so much as a kid. That being said, I do wish the gameplay was a little slower, or that there was a little bit less of a scramble as the core mechanic, so it'd be a little easier to tell what's going on the screen at once. It very much has the energy as a viewer of watch one person get hit for the first time, and then watch them immediately lose that character. That being said, especially with the way that with outside material it can bring new people into the fighting game community, I think that DB Fighter Z is a really, really strong example of a game that is fun to watch as a casual fan. The opener for Day 3, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom, was the oldest game on the main stage at this year's EVO, and it really shows the legacy support that this game has. Now, very similar to Dragon Ball FighterZ, this is another game where we have a cast of mostly mainstream characters that can bring in some non-fighting game fans, but it's also another perfect mirror match, with both players playing the same 3 characters in identical positions. Now, here's what I'm going to say that's going to make a lot of people angry at me, but I got to stand by my truth. In 2023, it is impossible to watch this game as a casual fan. The entire set, which is like a super blowout, a total 3-0, is nothing but rushdowns, never-ending combos, animations and particle effects that make hitboxes hard to read. You know, all of the things that make Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 exactly what it is, but it makes it so difficult to watch the game for the first time and understand what's happening. I had zero idea what was going on in-game beyond, oh hey look, flashy combo. There's so much going on the screen between animations and particle effects and support characters coming out and offering attacks. The screen is just so busy and chaotic that it's impossible to visually tell what the hell's going on at any point in the game. All of my critiques of Melty Blood and Dragon Ball, how they're hard to read or understand, how the animations are distracting and get in the way of seeing the hitboxes, all of these are seen at their worst with Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Now, I've played this game a little bit casually, and it's a ton of fun, and watching people play up there on the big stage, it looks like a lot of fun. But it makes absolutely no sense, and it's such a chaotic mess that anyone who's tuning in for the first time is going to get totally lost and have no idea what the game is actually about. Tekken has always felt like the most realistic of the fighting game franchises in terms of its core gameplay mechanics, which does make it really funny that this grand final between Arslan Ash and Owl was a mirror match that saw ninjas teleporting all over the screen and lots of crazy shenanigans going on. And I'm not sure that this was a great indicator of what Tekken 7 looks like. Now, visually, Tekken has always been super easy to understand and very easy to read its gameplay. It has some of the least flashy animations and particle effects going on. There's not a ton of super animations going off every single round. It's generally pretty clear at all times what is going on, who hit a move, why the move hit. So it's pretty easy for us as casual fans to watch it and understand the flow of a fight. Now, that being said, just due to what Tekken is and how the mechanics work at the pro level and how important all this frame data is, but as a first-time viewer, it's really difficult for me to tell why one attack is working and why one isn't, repeatedly over and over again. Now, I also think that the mirror match here makes all of these problems a little more apparent, because it makes the gameplay feel a little slower and a little more pokey than it normally would. There's a lot of this feeling out process, and it takes a pretty long time before it really seems that Arslan Ash is taking control and really running away with these rounds. Well, I don't have any big gripes about Tekken 7. Aside from how easy it is to read the gameplay itself, I don't necessarily have a lot of positives that I want to give onto it. It gets a very middle-of-the-road score for me in terms of being approachable for a casual audience. It's easy to understand and read what's going on with the gameplay and the visuals, but they don't jump out of the screen as looking super fun or very exciting. The second to last game of the weekend, Guilty Gear Strife really popped off at EVO this year, with much higher attendance than expected, and a really hype grand final between the infamous Leffen and the underdog Neubenheimer. Now, while this may not have been the most dominant final that we saw altogether, Leffen did win Game 1 with 2 back-to-back perfect rounds, and that made for some really great TV. The whole final altogether is like maybe 6 minutes long, but each round is over so fast that lightning fast pacing makes each moment feel exciting. Like watching real sports where you need to watch the entire time, because if you even blink, you might miss the KO punch. Now, I don't play a lot of Guilty Gear, but I really like the visuals that I'm seeing here in Strife. It's a good line between having cool animations and particle effects on certain moves, but not having them decrease visibility and hitboxes. So the game, while seeming big and flashy and fast, also is very readable and it is understandable to that casual audience. The whole time that I was watching, I understood why one character was beating the other, and I understood how it was happening. Having 2 very different characters on screen also added a lot of variety and a lot of depth to this match that a lot of the mirror matches didn't. So having that difference in style between the two also made it a lot more exciting to watch altogether. So overall, while it was a very quick grand final, I was really blown away by Guilty Gear Strife, and my expectations were very much exceeded. As a first-time viewer, the game looked flashy and exciting, but I was able to read and understand what was happening. The action looked fun, but also approachable at a level that I might be able to play the game myself. Overall, I totally understand why registration numbers for this game were so high. I understand why it had this spot as the second to last game. But more importantly, I would say that this is definitely a very approachable game for casual fans of fighting games to give a watch. Now, the main event of the evening. Street Fighter has always been the most famous fighting game franchise since it began. But Street Fighter 6 hasn't just been following that trend, it has been demolishing it. 6 had almost triple the registration numbers that even the number 2 game at EVO did this year, and it has been selling like crazy. And for having its first EVO, Street Fighter 6 looked amazing here. Easily the best top 6 of the entire event, with every single match being crazy exciting close, and that grand final being the most hype match out of all of them. Nail biters beginning to end. But what about Street Fighter works so well? Well, the visuals are great. It looks really polished. It has an obvious identity and style to all of the characters and to its visual appearance. It's a good fusion of realistic, but that cartoonish animation that gives a character personality. The particle effects and the super animations as well, they add a little bit of pop and polish to the game. They add that excitement, but they're not distracting. They don't take up too much of the screen, and they never hide characters or their hitboxes. So all of these effects enhance the experience, and they don't don't detract or distract, which is so important and what so many other games have gotten wrong. The gameplay itself, because of these visuals, was super easy to follow, and it looks good. The game is fast, but not at such a chaotic lightning pace that I don't understand what's happening. It has good pacing beginning to end. But it wasn't just the visuals of the gameplay, but it was the set itself that made this grand final easily the best one of the weekend. Angry Bird versus Mena RD had one of those legendary sets that you always have to see, with every single game being so nail-bitingly close.
Feel it in my bones.
Oh, level 2! Oh my god, that's a lot of damage. Is this enough?
I think it's dead.
Dead from the bird, the pixel from Mena.
We saw 3 different characters too, and after so many mirror matches, it was nice not only seeing Mena choose 2 different characters, but then getting this variety of playstyles. Angry Bird sticking with the rushdown Ken, and then Mena going from the weird different options with Blanca to then being his own zoning spacing based character with Luke and his fundamentals. For me, though, what really made this the grand final to remember was a moment when Mena RD's controller gets disconnected. And immediately, you see Angry Birds take his hands off his controller and wait for his opponent to get himself settled before they continue the action. It's that level of sportsmanship, it's that respect, and then it's the mutual love for the game you see after the set's over and you see the 2 men hugging. And that's what I love to see in a community. And that's what this grand final felt like. 2 people loving the game and celebrating what feels like not just a celebration for the 2 of them in that moment, but a celebration for all of the fighting game community and all of the Street Fighter fans. Altogether, 2023 had a great EVO tournament. Granted, we were maybe a little heavy on the mirror matches, which is more fun for some people and less fun for others. But let me tell you, the games that had good grand finals had great grand finals. Now, as a casual fan, I think the games that are the hardest to get into and watch were King of Fighters for its lack of appeal and identity, Melty Blood for hard to understand gameplay and distracting visuals, and sorry guys, but Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 for having impossible to understand gameplay and blinding, distracting visuals. Now on the other end of that, Grand Blue Fantasy vs. Rising has way too long of a name, but looked really impressive for a pre-release tournament and looks like a lot of fun in the future. Guilty Gear Strife also looked hella fun and clearly showed that it has a ton of personality, but Street Fighter 6 was obviously the game of the weekend and stole the show, demonstrating just why it has been selling so well this year. Now, everyone has to remember that these are just like my opinions, man. I'm admitting that I am a casual, noob-level fighting game player. But I think that it's important that we are judging these things not just for the diehards, but also for our casual audience. Now, the fighting game community is clearly a space for dedicated professional players that want to go super in-depth on their game and understand and master every little detail. But having games only go to a diehard audience is how you start to lose your community over time, and it makes it hard to bring in new members. Having these tournaments be casual friendly in terms of their viewership is so important to growing the community, and I hope it's a trend that we keep seeing as it goes on and on and on. And everyone, those were my opinions on what games from EVO 2023 were the most fun to watch for a casual audience. Obviously, if you disagree with me, we can fight about it a little bit in the comments. But if you liked the video, please give me a like, subscribe to the channel as we're still trying to grow this platform out, and, tell your friends about it. Again, everyone, my name is Dr. Jules, and have a nice day.